convinces religious people that there's something we're missing. And I think we have to be sensitive to this.
Absolutely. That's why they bring up, what about when has secularism ever built anything like Durham Cathedral, or Chartres, or devotional painting, or the music of
Bach? But I think we have answers to that. I think we have answers to that. I mean, and you provide a very good answer to that. If there was secular patronage of the arts at that point, then, you know, one, we can't know that Michelangelo was actually a believer, because the consequences of professing your unbelief in that case was death. But two, if we had a secular organization
to commission Michelangelo,
you know, we would have all that secular artwork.
Though, I didn't actually say that the corollary held.
Which?
I think it's true we can't know with devotional painting and sculpture and architecture that the patronage didn't have a lot to do with it. But I can't hear myself saying, if only you had a secular painter, you've done just as good work.
Oh, no, no, I think I'm fusing you and Richard there.
I think I can't, I don't know why, and I'm quite happy to find that I don't know why. I can't quite hear myself saying
that Michelangelo, if he'd been commissioned to do the ceiling of a museum of science, wouldn't have produced something just as wonderful.
In some way, I'm reluctant to affirm that, yes.
I find it very, very easy to believe that.
That could be a difference between us. I mean, with devotional poetry, where I do think, I don't know very much about painting and architecture and music, but, and some devotional architecture, like, say, St. Peter's, you know, it
couldn't be done.
I don't like any way. And knowing that it was built by a special sale of indulgences doesn't help either.
Yeah, right.
With devotional poetry, like that of, say, John Donne or George Herbert, I find it very hard to imagine that it's faked, or done for a patron. I mean,
yes,
it would be very improbable people would write poetry like that.
But could it be done in the spirit
please
of
anyone? Well, I frankly think that's the only explanation.
But in any case, what conclusion would you draw? I mean, if Donne's devotional poetry is wonderful, so what? I mean, it doesn't show that it represents truth in any sense.
Not in the least. Well, my favourite devotional poem is Philip Larkin's Churchgoing. It's one of the best poems ever written.
Right.
It exactly expresses. I wish I had it here. Well, actually, I do have it here. If you like, I can read it. But I wouldn't trust anyone who believed any more or any less than Larkin does when he goes to a wayside Gothic church in the English countryside.
Right.
Who felt, I don't say believed, I shouldn't say believed, who felt any more than he does. He's an atheist. Or who felt any less, that there's something serious about this.
All right, but...
And something written into the human personality and as well as the landscape.
Well, this brings us back to your
I don't see that this is
anything
other than a special
saying
case.
It says nothing about the truth of religion.
I don't think this is how this is anything other than a special case. Other special cases of which would be you just couldn't, I can't think of a perfect example of this, only by being lost at sea for 2 years in a boat and then surviving that's the only way you could conceivably have written this account. It could not be fiction.
Or quit smoking.
And it's glorious, wonderful art, and that can be true, and we just accept that's true. And Donne's poetry, only very extreme circumstances could make it possible, and we can be grateful, perhaps, that those extreme circumstances existed and made this possible.
In his case,
right.
But now you wouldn't recommend being lost at sea to everyone.
No,
No, I wouldn't recommend Death Be Not Proud to anyone either. It's a wonderful poem. It's a complete gibberish if you look only at the words.
But you
it's the most extraordinary gibberish if you look only at the words, but there's an X factor involved, which I'm quite happy to both assume will persist and will need to be confronted.
Right. You raised this issue, though, of whether or not we would wish the churches emptied on Sundays. And I think you were uncertain whether you would, and I think I would agree. I would want a different church. I would want a different ritual, motivated by different ideas. But I think there's a place for the sacred in our lives, but under some construal that doesn't presuppose any bullshit. But I think there's a usefulness to seeking profundity as a matter of our attention, and our neglect of this area, I think, as atheists, at times makes even our craziest opponents seem wiser than we are. And I mean, take someone like Sayyid Qutb, who's, as crazy as it gets. I mean, Osama bin Laden's favorite philosopher. But he came out to Greeley, Colorado, I think it was, around 1950, yes, and spent a year in America and noticed that all his American hosts were spending all their time gossiping about movie stars and trimming their hedges and coveting each other's automobiles. And he came to believe that America was or the West was so trivial in its preoccupations and so materialistic that it had to be destroyed. Now, this shouldn't be construed as giving any credence to his worldview, but he has a point. There is something trivial and horrible, yes, about the day-to-day fascinations of most of us and most people most of the time. There's a difference between kind of really using your attention wisely in a meaningful way and our perpetual distraction. And traditionally, only religion has tried to enunciate and clarify that difference. And I think that's that's a lapse in our.
I think you've made that point, and we've accepted it, Sam.
Yeah,
and I think that's. I mean, as going back to the thing about whether we like to see churches empty, I think I would like to see churches empty. What I wouldn't like to see, however, is ignorance of the Bible, because you cannot understand literature without knowing the Bible. You can't understand art. You can't understand music. There are all sorts of things you can't understand for historical reasons. But those historical reasons you can't wipe out. They're there. And so even if you don't actually go to church and pray, you've got to understand what it meant to people to pray and why they did it and what these verses in the Bible mean and what this...
But is it only that? Just the retrospective kind of historical appreciation of our
You could more than just appreciate
ignorance?
it. You can lose yourself in it, just as you can lose yourself in a work of fiction without actually believing that the characters are real.
But you're sure you want to see the churches empty? You can't imagine a variety of churches, maybe by their lights, an extremely denatured church, a church which has ritual and loyalty and common cause and purpose, but and even
music,
and music, and they sing the songs and they do the rituals, but where the irrationality has simply been laundered out.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you go to those places for funerals and weddings, and you have beautiful poetry and music.
And also for
group solidarity.
Group solidarity to create some project which is hard to get off the ground otherwise.
I think there's one more tiny thing. I mean, I haven't been tempted to go to churches, and that's a very, very small point. But I mean, one reason that makes it very easy to keep me out of it is the use of the New English Bible instead of the James one.
Yes.
I mean, there's really no point. I can't say where anyone goes, and I can see how people stay away.
No.
They've thrown away
all the poetry,
pearl richer than all their tribe.
Absolutely.
They don't even know what they've got. It's terrible. If I was a lapsed Catholic and I brooded about how I wanted my funeral to be, which is not something I would.
Want the Latin Mass?
Yes,
absolutely.
Well, but, I mean, there's another issue there, which of course is that when it becomes
I want a proper Tridentine.
When it becomes intelligible, the nonsense becomes more transparent, and so if it's in Latin, it can survive much better. It's rather like a camouflaged insect. It can get through the barriers because you can't see it. And whereas when it's translated into not just English but modern English, you can see it for what it is.
But now, seriously, then, do you therefore delight in the fact that churches are modernizing their texts and using the...
No, I don't. It's an aesthetic point. No, I don't. No,
that's the worst of both worlds.
I think it seems to me.
And we should be grateful for it. We didn't do this to them.
Yeah, that's right. We didn't impose this on them.
Any more than we...
we weren't clever enough.
Any more than we don't blow up Shia mosques either. We don't blow up the Bamiyan Buddhas.
Bamiyan Buddhas, exactly.
We don't desecrate. We would be, for the reasons given by Sophocles and Antigone, we would have a natural resistance to profanity and desecration. We leave it to the pious to destroy churches and burn synagogues or blow up each other's mosques. And I think that's a point that we might spend more time making, because I do think it is feared of us, this was my point to begin with, that we wish for a world that's somehow empty of this echo of music and poetry and the numinous and so forth, that we would be happy in a brave new world. And since I don't think it's true of any of us,
No, it's not.
it's a point one might spend a bit more time making, that the howling wilderness of nothingness is much more likely to result from holy war or religious conflict or theocracy than it is from a proper secularism, which would therefore, I think, have to not just allow or leave or tolerate or condescend to or patronize, but actually, in a sense, welcome the persistence of something like faith.